Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. So, in this video, I'm gonna try and make the claim that Muslims in Canada are better. They're better than Muslims in the U.S. I live here in Canada. The U.S. is just south of us. Um, and there's just observations that my family, my friends have made that kind of uh, we come to the conclusion that we're just different. Canadian Muslims are different from American Muslims. So obviously when I say this, I'm not talking about all American Muslims being bad and all Canadian Muslims being good. I'm not saying that all American Muslims are living sinful lifestyles, and I'm not saying that all Canadian Muslims. I'm not saying that all Canadian Muslims are good pious Muslims. I'm not saying anything close to that. But I'm just saying in general, overall, I really feel like there's a huge difference between us Canadian Muslims and Muslims in the US when it comes to being a practicing Muslim and staying away from haram and sinful activities. This also isn't to say that Canada is a paradise for practicing Muslims, but I'm just trying to say that compared to the US, the spirituality of Muslims in Canada is stronger and better than the spirituality of Muslims in the US. So just comparing Canada and the US first. Starting with Canada. Canada is less politically divided than the US. Our political parties that we have here, they're not that far off from each other ideologically speaking. And we have many political parties here in Canada, whereas in the US there's just two. Canada has a collectivist culture. This was actually in our curriculum when I was in high school. We talked about how Canada is a collectivist culture, whereas the US, it's a more independent culture. And no, I didn't go to an Islamic school. I went to a public school full of white Western people. So Canada has a collectivist culture, and when you have this, what happens is that this collectivist culture, this culture that that we're all on one level, that we're all together, this trickles down from a national level to our own local Muslim communities. Okay, our own Muslim communities, we have the idea that we win together or we lose together. And it's because Canada as a country as a whole, it's very collectivist, the sharing of resources, the sharing of cultures. Here in Canada, we don't have any overtly hateful and racist political parties. That's why our right-wing parties here in Canada, they include Muslims, and our left-wing liberal parties, it can have anti-LGBTQ politicians. I mean, this isn't to say, I'm not saying that you don't hear about the occasional politician in Canada who's racist, but it's far less likely to happen compared to the US. Okay? Because Canada, by constitution, we are a multicultural society, and this translates to having a collectivist culture. We keep our own culture, we celebrate our own culture, while at the same time being an ally of other cultures. So we have a multicultural society here in Canada, where minorities are expected to keep their culture and religion. we're expected to keep it and pass it on. It's not just Muslims. I mean, there's so many Polish and Ukrainian and German and Scandinavian communities here that that go back generations and generations and generations, and because of this, it allows us Muslims to do the same thing. We haven't been here as long as they have, but we can still pass down our culture and religion easily because the overall Canadian culture allows this. The US, they don't have this multicultural society. They have something called a melting pot model where everyone needs to assimilate into the dominant single culture. When this happens, your religion gets kicked to the side. In the US, there's only two political parties which are completely opposite in many areas. The US culture, it values independent freedoms over the greater community. It values selfishness over everyone else. This is the US culture. The capitalist culture in the US, it causes them to focus on materialism. And when this happens, you push your religion to the side. Religion gets kicked to the side, it gets kicked to the curb. In the US, you need to fight for yourself. You gotta fight you gotta have a certain level of greed to be financially stable, to have a standing in the community, overall community. You gotta focus on work, to make a good living, and also about fitting in to the dominant culture. When this happens, religion is erased. Muslims in the US, they have to deal with racist, hateful Republicans, racist, hateful evangelicals who are always Republican. So what happens is Muslims in the US are forced to join hands with the Democrats, the Democratic Party. This party is accepting of Muslims, but it's made up of this party is accepting of Muslims and other minorities, but at the same time it's made up usually of atheists and LGBTQ members, and that's usually the agenda. The Democratic Party has a liberal secular agenda. Even though it accepts Muslims, it still has a liberal and secular agenda. And what happens? Religion gets kicked to the side. So this causes Muslims who join, who vote who vote as Democrats, who support Democratic politicians. This causes Muslims to put religion aside. They put Islam aside. They have to try hard to fit in with the liberal and secular policies of the Democratic Party and their supporters. So naturally what happens is they adopt their ideas, the liberal secular ideas, and they start acting like them. And another thing, Democrats are often the opposite side of the same coin. The other side is Republican. The US culture, dominant culture, it's identical. Okay? The melting pot model that the US has, that you have to, assimilate to be noticed, to be liked, to make a living. Both, Republicans and Democrats are part of this melting pot US culture. But, it includes things like, alcohol and drugs and having a party culture and fornicating and adultery and tight and revealing clothes and tattoos and talking in a vulgar manner and having boyfriends and girlfriends. This culture is shared by both Democrats and Republicans, okay? They share this culture. They both do it. So naturally, Muslims have to do the exact same thing. Okay, this causes Muslims to try even harder to adopt the ideas and behavior of the dominant culture, which I just mentioned, all these sinful things. It's the dominant US culture shared by both the Republican Party and Democratic Party. The supporters and politicians in both parties, they engage in all of this, alcohol, have a party culture, and wear dirty and disturbing clothing, have tattoos and whatnot. So, there is no third option here, so Muslims have to accept this. Muslims have to accept this to be seen as American. There is no third option here. Okay, even though the Democratic Party is accepting of Muslims, they still are a part of the national culture, the national American culture, and you can't avoid it. There is no third option here for Muslims. You have to accept all of this. If a Muslim decided to support Republicans, even though they're racist and hateful people, if Muslims decide to support them, but it's the exact same thing. Republicans have, they also have that national, American culture, which is, as I mentioned a few times already, alcohol, drugs, party culture, boyfriends and girlfriends. If you're a Muslim and you support the Republican Party, well, you have to support this as well, because it's the national dominant culture in the US to do all this. So if you're a Muslim, you're trapped. You have to accept it. You have to take part in it. If you don't, you are, you won't get anywhere in the US. The US has a Hollywood culture everywhere, okay? And before, because right now we live in a very globalist society, a globalized culture. Before, in Canada, we often used to see that the US has a Hollywood culture, and in Canada, we tried to separate ourselves from that. I'll give you an example here. So when I was growing up, when I was in elementary and junior high and high school, okay, I'll start off this way. When my dad was born and raised here. His parents are from Pakistan, but he was born and raised in Canada. When he was growing up in the 50s and 60s and 70s, there was no culture of having a boyfriend or girlfriend at that time. Okay, it was usually, the people would, usually get married, and that's the only relation they would have when it came to, a relationship with the opposite gender. My older sister, when she was growing up, it was in university when people started to date and, have a party culture. When I was growing up, okay, this dating and party culture, it made its way into high school. Because because as I said, Canada, we watch a lot of American content here, but at the same time we wouldn't copy it. I'm not talking about, Muslims only. I'm talking about just general white people here as well. Because it was what they did in the US It was seen as an American thing to do. Okay? You would not find anyone having a boyfriend and girlfriend when I was in junior high. That's middle school. If you did, then people would laugh at you. The white kids would laugh at you because they would say, "Oh, you're trying to be all American and all Hollywood like." For my older sister, it was in university. For my older sister, when she was in high school, if there was someone who tried to, if there was a boyfriend and girlfriend, they would get laughed at by the white people. They would say the exact same thing. They would say, "You're just, you're being American." Do you see what I'm saying? I live in a very white city, a white country, but it was seen as an American thing to do if you wanted to have a boyfriend or girlfriend, if you wanted to have a party culture. It was seen as an American thing to do. Unfortunately now, it's because we have, a globalized culture, that American culture of, having boyfriends and girlfriends, having a party culture, it's everywhere now. But you see the point I was trying to make, right? In Canada, we didn't have that before. It was not as strong. You would get made fun of if you try to do that boyfriend girlfriend culture. You would get made fun of by the white kids. They would say you're trying to be all American. They would say, why are you copying what you see on Nickelodeon, what you see on Disney Channel, what you see on Family Channel? These are American channels, and the content on there features, boyfriends, girlfriends, party culture. For a long time, you couldn't do that here in Canada, in a white Western Canada. The US, it has a very individualistic culture, right? An independent culture. It values independent freedoms, independent rights. And again, it doesn't allow this environment doesn't allow religion to survive. This causes Muslims to become whitewashed and irreligious because you're no longer part of the community, a collectivist community. You're on your own. I have extended family in the US. Like many Muslims do in Canada. My extended family in the US, they are very westernized and secularized and liberalized. But alhamdulillah, my family and my extended family here in Canada, alhamdulillah, we're still good Muslims. We try to be, at least. But both my family and my extended family here in Canada and in the US, I mean, we both come from conservative environments. Yet my extended family in the US, they're different. I come from the Pakistani Indian Muslim culture. It's pretty conservative. But like, why is it that my extended family in the US, they're different? Why are the complete opposites of us? Surely the socio-political and socioeconomic environments of Canada and the US, it has to be the only factor. The same goes for my friends. I've had discussions with them. They say the exact same thing. They tell me their family, their extended family, and their family friends who come from, the same Pakistani Indian Muslim culture, the conservative Pakistani Indian Muslim culture. they say the exact same thing. They tell me their family, you know, their extended family and whatnot, they're westernized and secularized and liberalized. They tell me it's common to see their family, and this is my extended family as well. But I'm just saying that, you know, my friends also say the same thing. They tell me that their extended family in the US, their extended family in the US, they engage in alcohol and drugs and premarital intercourse. Same with my extended family in the US, same thing. And you know, my friends are saying the exact same thing. One of my friends, he's from my city here in Canada, but he recently left to the US for work. When he came back, you know, for a visit, we were talking, and he was saying the exact same thing. He said the Muslims in the US they're different. They he said they're you know, they're whitewashed and secularized and liberalized. It came as a shock to him. He didn't think it'd be any different. He thought that Muslims in the US would be the exact same as Muslims in Canada. You know, these were his observations when he was down there, down in the US. He noticed a huge difference among Canadian Muslims and American Muslims. You know, my own parents, when they talk to their cousins or family friends in the US, or when they meet them after a very long time, I always hear them saying the exact same thing. You know, they say they're disappointed when they're talking to each other. My parents, when they're talking to each other about, you know, their family friends and cousins in the U.S., I always hear them. They always say the same thing. You know, they're disappointed in how they've become and how they've changed, and how it's so strange seeing their kids being westernized and whitewashed. Um, you Conservative Christians in the U.S., you know, they themselves are they follow a very watered down and secularized version of their religion. Many conservative Christians accept things like premarital intercourse, tight and revealing clothes, tattoos, alcohol, and so forth. And of course, liberal Americans already do all that. So, you know, as I mentioned, Muslims in the US will, you know, will obviously engage in all of this as well. All the sins that I mentioned. It'll be very difficult for them not to. Because you have on both sides the people that hate you, the racist people, and the people that accept you. They both have this culture of boyfriends and girlfriends and alcohol and you know, college and work parties and mixed gender dancing and whatnot. So you can't avoid it if you're a Muslim in the U.S. And many Muslims in the U.S., they, you know, they engage in all of this. I don't want to be biased here, because I mentioned that I come from the Pakistani and Indian Muslim community. I don't want to be biased when I say that, you know, we usually are more religious than other kinds of Muslims. But it's true, okay? I've mentioned this before. Many Muslim countries are already secularized and liberalized due to colonialism or due to forced secularism, as in the case of Turkey, or forced atheism, as in the case of many post-Soviet Muslim countries. So when they, you know, immigrate to the U.S., and even Canada for that matter. But the US, when they go there, nothing really changes. They maintain their secular liberal lifestyle. In Canada, because we have more of a collectivist lifestyle, it would probably be easier for them to, come back to religion. But in the US, it just makes it all worse. But, it's disappointing to see my own people, my, Pakistani Indian Muslim people in the US, how they act so liberal and secular and whitewashed. Because, Pakistanis and Indian Muslims are not, we didn't really go through forced atheism or forced secularism. We did go through colonialism, but I mentioned in my previous hijab video that the British, when they colonized the subcontinent, they left religion and culture to the locals. But so yeah, it's disappointing to see people from there, Muslims from the subcontinent, just lose their religion and identity when they move to the US. It's very easy to lose your religion in the US, as I've shown throughout this video. Pakistanis and Indian Muslims, they usually have an understanding of the Quran, of hadiths, of fasting, of salah, that's prayer, of important du'as, that's also prayer, and so forth. And they usually do know what's haram and halal. They usually do know what's haram and like sinful, but seeing so many of them in the US, just, forgetting who they are, what their religion stands for, seeing them forget all that is just, annoying and shocking. I will say, even though it's annoying and shocking to see them like that, they're not the ones leading the non-Muslim, the non-practicing Muslim category in the US. As I mentioned before, those are the Muslim countries that were heavily colonized by Europeans culturally as well. Many Arab countries and African Muslim countries, when the Europeans colonized them, they also culturally colonized the countries. They are the ones who usually are the non-practicing Muslims. It's not usually Pakistani Indian Muslim people. I linked to a study, I can't remember if it was Gallup, in my hijab video, that showed that, the most conservative kinds of Muslims are usually from the subcontinent. The most conservative kind of Muslim women, they're usually from the subcontinent. And to see that, to see them just completely give up on their religion, to give up on Islam when they move to the US, it's just, sad. When there was a time a couple years ago when there was a wedding that I went to with my family. This was in Toronto that I went to a wedding that the wedding was held in. It was one of our cousins that I've never met before, and a lot of our extended family from the US came as well. Listening to what these uncles were saying, listening to what these aunties were saying, listening to the um, younger kids there. Um, the ones that came from the US, I'm talking about them. Listen to what they're saying, the aunties and uncles and the kids, their kids. Shocking, annoying, strange. Why, these are the people who completely gave up on their religion. Um, Me and my sisters and a few of these are our extended cousins that we from the US that we never really met. But after the wedding, we all went to a restaurant. I was My sisters were obviously hanging out with the female extended family, extended cousins, and I was hanging out with the male extended cousins. But we were all kind of on one table, and they ordered alcohol to drink. It came as such a huge shock to me and my sisters, and the extended family, our extended cousins, they made fun of us for not drinking alcohol. This is the point we have come to. This is the amount of whitewashed and secularized Muslims that exist. They made fun of us, our extended family from the US. When they came, they made fun of us for not drinking alcohol. When we told them that, we don't do boyfriends and girlfriends, they made fun of us again. It was really difficult to change the topic when our own extended family is making fun of us for not engaging in these sinful behaviors. Here in Canada, in many places, we're still practicing social distancing and face masks, and travels. It's still kind of restricted. But I look at the social media profiles of American Muslims, whom, by the way, are identify as Democrat, whom are supposed to be science friendly, like the pro science, pro medicine. And they're taking photos at packed restaurants, packed sports festivals, packed nightclubs and bars. There's no mask to be seen anywhere, no social distancing. I mean, in the time of COVID and countless dangerous mutations that are going on, countless dangerous mutations, like look how they're acting. It's identical to right-wing Republicans who opposed face masks, who opposed lockdowns, who opposed social distancing. These Democrat Muslims who are supposed to be pro-science and pro-medicine, when their behavior, look at it, it's exactly the same as these right-wing Republicans. No mask, bars and nightclubs, no social distancing. Another example of how there's zero difference between them. Another example how, Muslims have to engage in, bar and nightclub and boyfriend and girlfriend culture because it's everywhere around them. And I feel like what I've just said about American Muslims, I feel like they can't see it. I feel like only, from a perspective outside the US, they'll be able to see that, oh my god, they're exactly the same as these right-wing Republicans who are supposed to hate Muslims. Um, so yeah, like these Muslims in the US, they're on the opposite sides of the same coin as these right-wing white nationalist people. No difference in behavior. Both do boyfriend, girlfriend, alcohol, night clubbing. I told online a Muslim, or I made a general comment that Muslims in the U.S. who say they're Democrat, I, I said that they're just like Republicans. Muslims in the U.S. who identify as Democrat, they're just like Republicans. And then a bunch of Muslims in the U.S. they replied to my comment by saying, they were like offended. They're like, how can you compare us to these Republicans who are anti-Muslim? And then, I told them, like, your whitewashed, secularized lifestyle, it's exactly the same as theirs. It's no different. And this thing they didn't understand. And I wasn't surprised. Conservative evangelicals in the U.S. they're always very pro-war. They love war. You can look at these statistics of evangelicals and Republicans who really approved of the war in Iraq and Afghanistan and supporting Israel against Palestine. Conservative evangelicals are really pro-war. They love war. Liberals are usually against war. Democrats are usually against war. But so conservatives, they want to continue the European colonization. Liberals don't do that, but they want an ideological colonization. And they're usually successful in that, and many Muslims fall victim to it. And then, white liberals, they're a problem, both in Canada and the US. They want to advance their own agenda of ideological colonization, which I just mentioned. They want to make everyone, pro-LGBTQ. They want to get rid of religion. They're anti-religion, anti-religious people. And at the same time, they want to unite everyone into one belief system. So white liberals can be just as racist as, white conservatives. They want to transform everybody to their agenda. And many Muslims, fall victim to it in the US. And, in Canada too, but I would say more so in the US. Liberals and Democrats, they pretend to be on our side. They pretend to be on the side of Muslims in the US, but they're not. They will try to convert Muslims in the US to be pro-LGBTQ, convert them into, being anti-religious, and they're successful in it. Many Muslims are pro-LGBTQ. Many Muslims are increasingly identifying as irreligious. And of course, naturally, with that comes apostasy. And many Muslims in the US who vote Democrat, they can't see this. And of course, you know, Canada, it's not, as I mentioned, it's not a paradise for practicing Muslims. All this what I said about the US, it exists here too, but to a lesser extent. But you know, the Canadian Liberal Party, it's pretty much the same as the Democrat Party in the US. They're pro-Muslim, but they're also pro-LGBTQ, and they want to root out religion, kind of. And many Muslims who do vote Liberal here in Canada, they can't see it either. Liberal and progressive ideology, you know, they are just as Islamophobic as right-wing evangelicals. Liberal and progressives, they want to do an ideological colonization of Muslims. I'll talk more about this in another video about Islamophobia and about racism. But this is it for now.